This is day 1 of the June 92 7-day retreat at Springwater. Before getting into the talk, just a mention of something I forgot to talk about last night. For the sake of people who are here for the first time, once during a block of meeting time, I may come into this room either to walk when walking is going on, or if there's just quiet sitting taking place, I usually stand next to the people who are here quietly. And sometimes it strikes someone as strange. What is she doing? Why is she doing it? I'm coming in here because we're in this whole thing together. And I do talk about 8 hours a day. And to come in here and be quiet with each one of you, which is us, is a wonderful thing. To be together non-verbally. I'm not checking up on your posture, how you sit, or trying to figure out what you're thinking about. It's always the same stuff we're thinking about. We're thinking about ourselves. To be together with no particular purpose, objective, or role. It may be very hard to think that I'm not standing there in a role, but I'm not. Just there, together, looking at the trees or the floor or the wall as nothing special, nobody special. Can we meet like that? On the first day of a retreat, I do talk about a very important topic, which is authority. I've done it ever since, giving talks or holding retreats. And yet, if you've been here before, to take care not to tune into the channel, oh, I know what she's going to say, I've heard that before, because then you really just hear what was said before, because you're tuning into memory. So can both you and I, in talking about authority again this morning, not tune into memory alone, automatically? Memory is there in some capacity, but not driving automatically the listening or the talking. Because it's very important for you and me together to look at this whole problem of authority that we create from moment to moment in each other, and how it prevents direct, simple looking and direct, simple, intimate relationship between each other. Having ideas about the other person's authority or non-authority that immediately shapes our perception, our attitude, our listening and thinking. We're also going to talk about listening / looking, all of the senses. I sometimes use seeing, then I use the word looking, or contacting, or being in touch with. One sense always comprehending, holding together all the other senses. Recently someone said, what word would you use if somebody was deaf? I'm not deaf, but I'm quite sure that just because the ear doesn't function, there is no listening. the senses being open, maybe the other senses that much sharper. So if seeing or listening or contacting is used, don't take it too literally, but can, in the presence of this word, the mind quiet down in opening up, which involves all the senses and all the skin, the whole body, all of ourselves opening up to what's there, what's being said, what frightens us, what makes us angry, what pains us and pleases us. To be open to it, to listen to it, to be attentive to it. That's what I used to say long ago. Be aware of it, we use that word. Not to fixate on a word. Neither you nor me need to fixate on any words. Words are just vehicles, sometimes very tender vehicles, to convey something beyond themselves. So we'll talk about listening and our relationship with each other in this retreat, and maybe not just in this retreat, but how do we relate to each other in our daily life. I've already written down a few questions for meetings, but there will probably be no time today for them. I will start with that tomorrow. What about authority? Right now, as you listen, think of Toni, look at Toni, have an image of her, which we do, we don't we? We have images of each other, of ourselves. What is Toni to you? An authority figure, and what does it mean, an authority figure? Somebody who, when she says something, has influence, because she is an authority figure, it must be true or must have a lot of weight. I will remember it, follow it, adopt it, accept it, or reject it, because I reject all authority, I reject what she says. Can one examine that right now? I must not have a picture of authority of her, or I must. We're not talking about musts, even though that's how the brain usually registers what is being said. Can we become aware of that too, that when we hear something, it is in terms of this is what I should do and this is what I should not do. Whereas we're just looking at things that are there, that are happening, questioning whether they are happening, and if they are, can they come into full light of this bright room and day? That in fact one has ideas of authority about this person who's sitting here, may not even be Toni, but somebody's sitting here, the only one talking. That's what people sometimes say. You are an authority, you're the only one who's talking. That already evokes a certain attitude in listening and reacting or accepting, rejecting. So how can we speak to each other? Because we're communicating with each other, and I am sort of the mouthpiece for all of us. I'm not just talking from a strictly personal perspective. We're talking together all the time here and in Europe and so forth, and this all then comes out of one mouth, but it is the human mind being looked at, examined and questioned. Is being expressed now. Happens to be one person, but what is being expressed is very universal, very general, and for each one of us to look at. Not to follow, to believe in, or to accept or reject, but to question whether it is so. That we do make authority images out of somebody sitting here and talking with a microphone next to her. With some name that one may have heard before, a book that one may have read, all of this adds an instant conditioned input of making up something that the word is authority. The word isn't important, but how do we listen and relate to each other? And the question is being posed very simply whether we can relate to one another, you and me and people to each other, without added imagery of higher and lower, better and worse, authority and non-authority. To get together here on this grassy, fragrant hillside as human beings, deeply interested in the problems of human beings living on this earth, often in great pain, great sorrow, great fear, great loneliness, great longing. And a continued desire to find security in authority. Find security in having found my teacher, my spiritual whatever, guide, mentor. I'm not saying there's something wrong with it or don't do it, or I'm not putting it down. We're looking at it. Is that what is happening in us? Because the only thing that is freeing to this mind and body is insight into itself, discovery into itself. Not principles of right and wrong and following precepts and commandments. That's not freeing. To directly see the image of authority coming up and what it does, the heartbeat or the resistance or the attachment, the looking for security. When that is seen, then there's a possibility of being free of it, of being free of what is here in the light of day, open to inspection, open to wondering about it in a non-judgmental way. We are all conditioned to authority, all of us, because we were all tiny little creatures in the presence of giants who could do with us what they wanted to. We were helpless. We were trained, educated, taught, blamed, punished, rewarded, always by those in authority. This whole organism has taken it for granted that there is such a thing that must either be followed or fought or accepted or propitiated, made benign, made to like me so I can rest safely. Don't have to be afraid of this authority thundering out any moment at me, over me, into me. That's how we all have grown up, all of us. And here we're questioning it, we're looking at it, we're letting it percolate, come to light, be seen. and wondering simply, not necessarily yearningly and making a new goal out of it, but wondering simply whether we can relate to each other on the same level of looking and questioning together at the same thing right now. With no class differentiation, the upper and the lower, the accomplished and the unaccomplished, the advanced and the novice, all of these things that are so much in our blood, tissue. It's there, but it can be discovered. And in discovering, maybe for a moment, the mind is open to listen without assumptions about oneself or the other. Because in one moment of listening, being there, opening up, the energies are here, right here, with what's there. And not just compulsively driven by all that was there in the past. It does happen for all of us. Sometimes people come in and say, what you said today, it clicked. Something so clear. Why didn't you say that before? It was probably said before many times. But there has to be a connection in which speaking and listening is fresh. And then what is said and heard and what is happening has never happened before. It's new, this instant of fresh listening and looking and being there without imagery about each other that is being catered to or nurtured from past impulses, past recordings. And we're not saying get rid of the past recordings. It's impossible to get rid of them. But the energy can gather in listening now. It doesn't need the past recordings. They're not essential to listening and looking right now. They're essential in many ways in finding the place to the bathroom. If you're here for the first time, maybe you don't have that recording quite set yet. You're walking to the wrong direction. But once the recording is set and tried and tested, then it operates. And it's good it operates mechanically, so we don't run in a confused way in the wrong direction all the time. But right now, nothing is required of us. We don't have to be anything. I don't have to be anything either. I'm just looking and expressing what is being seen and listened to. Memory is there, but it is not in control automatically. Provides words, examples, remembered incidences of what people have said, what I have seen myself, gone through. But the mode is one of looking and listening freely, quietly, without knowing what the next moment will bring. This talk is not a structured, prepared thing. I've let go of that long ago. It's becoming too complicated to do that. Too much of a hindrance. Because the moment of looking together takes care of itself. It doesn't have to be planned out and then placed into memory. Then the mind becomes very narrow, just trying to tap that memory again. And it's perfectly safe too. We're always afraid, what will happen to me when I'm open and vulnerable? May not know what to do next. What will happen to this place next? Questions are coming up. In 10 years, or when Tony's dead. I'm not saying don't raise such questions, but right now, they're not needed. This moment is totally sufficient unto itself in just being here and not knowing about the next one. So in whatever comes up, can we bring it to each other in a group or in a private meeting? What probably happens, and again, memory says that people have mentioned it everywhere, in every retreat, sitting out in the solarium when one's turn comes to come in, or before one's turn has come up, the heart may pound. Maybe one has been here for many retreats. One person told me he's been here from the very beginning. He said, my heart is still pounding when I come in. So one takes note of it, feels it, and really feels a pounding heart. Has one really felt it without any negativity against it, without thinking it shouldn't be or it's embarrassing. All of this is hindrance in feeling a pounding heart, without even calling it that, to tune into that, which is an utterly miraculous, wondrous thing. This thumping in there, pounding, fast, and then after a while one has forgotten all about it, it's quiet again. Some memory, some association triggered it. That's how we live, full of associations and what they trigger in our bodies. But if we're kindly aware of it, without a call to arms or to action against it, then it's not a hindrance. It's not something that's handicapping us. We can live with it. And the less that is made of it, the quicker the body can restore its wisdom, its balance, because there's wisdom in this body in an unfathomable way to restore balance, if not too much interrupted by disturbing thoughts about how it feels right now, or how it should be feeling right now. I forgot to mention, please, as is happening right now, do feel free to move into a different position during a talk if you feel uncomfortable. We mentioned last night, it's very essential in a talk not to feel caught up in pain and discomfort. Because to look intensely together it requires all the energy we have. Or the more there is of it, the more intense the listening and maybe the discovery of what's happening. So, in listening to each other, not just to what is being said, but also what is happening inside, the reactions that come up, maybe the thumping heart, an anxiety. And before one knows it, one isn't listening anymore because what is being said feels too threatening. And then the mind is off someplace. It has its safety hatches, or what it thinks are safety hatches, to escape from what is perceived as threat to me, my structures, my habits, my reactions, to which there's a great attachment. And the mind is off, daydreaming, thinking about something else, or verbalizing approval or opposition. And then we're not moving together. That happens. And then one wakes up again to the fact that one was not listening. And at that moment, it's a very crucial moment of waking up again and being with the words and listening. Can the mind abstain from blaming itself for having wandered? Because that's a new wandering away from listening. It's such a marvelous, miraculous thing that the mind-body is capable of waking up to its mechanical responses and ongoings. The fact that this is possible to happen means we're not doomed to continue forever and forever in the same patterns, perpetuating them, generation to generation, and not knowing it, justifying it, defending it. The fact that we can wake up to defending a pattern is a miraculous thing. Defending a pattern and one waking up and wondering, why am I doing that? Not I shouldn't be doing it, but what's going on? What is happening? Why this defense? What is feeling threatened? That happens to all of us. And if also in the course of time there is less going with the criticism, the judgment, the despair over always finding one is still in the same way, that's also the same way. Just wake up to what's there and have no reaction to it, no commentary upon it. No call to action. Then the moving of people on mats, or the song of birds, or the rain, or whatever, that's also there then. Not just the fact that I was daydreaming in my comments about it, which is a new daydream. But what is really happening inside and out, in a simple way. We have learned to think of the spiritual realm as something having to do with marvelous, magnificent states of light, or whatever all one is imagining this to be, and is hoping that it would happen to one as it happened to these people whose books I read, or books about whom. But it begins with simple listening to what's happening now, not caught up in judgment about it, or if the judgment has happened, to be aware of judgment and its impeding qualities. Impeding on the body, on the senses, on the openness. To start with what's there. Somebody moving a leg, the sound of the cloth on the mat, maybe the creaking of a chair. The breathing is there, isn't it? One doesn't have to make a compulsive practice out of it. It's always there. Deep or shallow, choppy, short, excited in the throat or way down in the diaphragm. Can one listen to this breathing again without trying to make it into something more than what it is? Just what it is, and one doesn't really know what it is. Knowing comes after the perception. Perceiving is simple, it's just what's there. And then come the complications of what my teacher said should be there. Or what I read should be deep yogic breathing. What is it right now? Without all of that, just in simplicity listening. And not even calling it breathing, but listening, awareness of it. It is only thought that separates the belly from the throat, from the nose, etc. But without that, imaging and thinking is all one throbbing whole, not apart from the birds calling to each other. Grass is moving in the wind. So what are we? What am I? What are you? What are all of us? Apart from all the imagery we have about me and you and all of us. Gee, is that what we are? I don't know. I have no answer to this. It's an all-encompassing question, which includes everything and nothing. What am I? What are you without or apart from all the imagery with its emotional content? And the emotional content seems to make the imagery real because we can feel the excitement, the pleasure, the pain about ourselves. So there must be something real about it. What is real is that thought triggers the whole organism into activity, mobilizes the glands, the muscles, the organs, to feel what we call fright or anger or depression. And we're still more responding to these words about ourselves than to what's actually happening. So what is happening apart from the words, the imagery about anger or depression? Can it be touched immediately, meaning without any mediation? As it is manifesting right now. Thumping heart, the choppy breath, the aching back or shoulder, maybe something in the intestines churning, stomach feeling tight, or whatever. I'm not imposing something, I'm just have to use some example. But it can be also the feeling of serenity. Nothing moving, just an orderly functioning of this body in balance. So what are we without imagery? We can't fathom it, can we? But it can happen. All we fathom is more imagery about us, without images. But sitting quietly together, listening to the same bird calls, the same sounds of someone moving, the same breathing, a little bit different in each one of us. What are we? What is everything? Without words for an answer. And what is our relationship to each other? That word almost seems not to apply. We're here, together. Why say related? We're all here. One ear or one caw, 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 caw. Where in that is there authority? All these ideas we have about ourselves and others. That's just one of the happenings of this moment. To be seen, understood, and let go of, which it will if the mind is listening openly, freely to each moment. You could say, wait a minute, you left me long behind, I'm not open, I feel as closed and stuck as anyone could be, and you don't understand me. How is one able to communicate about closeness and stuckness? There's some in touchness with it to be able to communicate about it, isn't there? What is closeness and stuckness if I gently ease beyond the words into whatever this is designating? How does it feel? How does it sound? And to really explore that, judgments have to be in abeyance. Judgments get in the way like dust on the glasses if you look at something. So I'm not saying stuckness is bad and I should be open, I shouldn't be closed. All of this gets in the way of really touching closeness and stuckness and letting those words go. Because I want to feel it directly, firsthand. Nobody tell me about it. Here it is manifesting. What is it? Let it be there in daylight, fresh air. That's how we start. We start with what's there, not with what should be there. And unfortunately, I cannot always talk to every individual's condition at this moment. We're only talking to one. But it doesn't matter what the specifics are. It's always the same open looking, whether the looking includes stuckness and closeness, or the call of a crow. Spaciousness or serenity, or the throes of anxiety. Can it be the same listening, looking, and touching? Aware of the hindrance of judgment and therefore already beyond it, beyond the judgment, in touch with what's there. Is one aware of the judgment? It's so subtle often, so subtle, so concealed. So it takes very fine-tuned attention to discover judgment and resistance. Because it's not discovered, it continues and has its effects. So in this retreat, whether you're here for 2 days, 1 or 3, or the whole 7 days, what is our relationship with each other? in spite of all the imagery that's there, that's associated, that's constantly being fed and nurtured. It's in the air too. In spite of all of that, can we relate as human beings in a friendly way, intimate? Because we're concerned about the same things, you and I and all of us. Maybe it's important to add here that if I say something that you don't see in the same way, that you disagree with or would like to approach differently, do feel free to bring it up with me or with a group. Sometimes the notion hardens that have to do it Toni's way. I don't know what that is. But if you have a notion or a feeling that there is something that I should look at, where I'm stuck and closed, then let's share that. So that's also what meetings are for. Not to say yes to everything, but to question it, to see whether what is said is really testable in myself. And we can question each other. Can we? That's what friends can do together. Question each other. Without immediately being afraid I'm going to hurt him, and then he's going to remember that and carry it around. It may happen. Well, if it happens, we have more to look at. There's nothing that's not worth looking at and listening to in ourselves and each other, and in our relationship with each other. Because that's when a lot of stuff comes up, which remains sort of buried if we live too much in isolation, solitarily. Then a lot of stuff is not triggered. So do feel free to question me, challenge, if you will. See, when one can discover, it's the discovery of one's life, really, that there's nothing to defend. It's survivable to be attacked, entirely survivable to listen to it without defense. We need to discover this again and again and again. And big countries or groups haven't discovered that yet. I don't know if they ever will. But we as individual human beings need to discover it first, maybe. That we can survive, not just survive, but begin to flower when we're not defending ourselves all the time, but listening to what comes in and look at it. And move in a live, non-fixed, non-positioned way. what am I without defenses? Without something to defend? Then I'm all ears and eyes, aren't I? And the energy does not need to flow off, leak into armament. It's there for living and looking and being with each other. We will end here for today.